infrastructure. Let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas sea, together we'll build a future strong and key. Whoa, tune in every Wednesday, feel the vibe. For the stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress we'll uncover. With every discussion, let's support one another. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas sea, together we'll build a future strong and key. The numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, plans in our hands. Progress where every voice stands. In the progress, from the ground impact to the oil and gas sea, and we'll build a future strong and key. Strong and key. Tune in every Wednesday, feel the reality. Stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress. Diversity and discussion, let's support one another. In the heart of our nation, where voices collide, we're breaking down the policies with truth as our guide. With clarity on the mic, bringing light to the fight. Together we're ready, shining bright. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas sea, together we'll build a future strong and keen. We'll dive into the data, the numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas sea, together we'll build a future strong and key. Whoa, tune in every Wednesday, feel the vibe. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Agenda. We're back, and we're glad that you're here to join us again as we discuss the plans, policies, and progress on Behind the Agenda. I'm your host, Cornel Jones, and tonight we have a packed program addressing some of the most pressing economic and political narratives shaping Guyana's future. Let's start with the International Monetary Fund's latest Article 4 report on Guyana. The IMF has once again highlighted the country's strong economic growth, prudent fiscal management, and the government's effort to ensure sustainable development. Yet, despite the positive outlook, we know there are critics who remain intent on distorting the facts. We'll break down the IMF's key findings, what they mean for the ordinary citizen, and how the government is balancing rapid economic expansion with long-term social and infrastructural investments. Then there's Elson Lowe's latest letter attempting to paint a picture of poverty under the PPPC administration. But here is the reality. The combined budgets of 2023, 2024, and 2025 represents the largest pro-poor spending in our country's history. Investments in housing, healthcare, education, and direct transfers. So is this
about real concern for people or just another politically motivated attack? We'll unpack that. We also have to talk about the misinformation coming from the so-called oil and gas governance network. They claim the Access to Information Act is inadequate. But is that really the case? We'll examine their arguments, the facts, and why these narratives are often driven by external influences rather than genuine advocacy for transparency. And of course, we'll touch on the latest claim about Guyana's oil profit sharing agreement, another area where political opportunists love to twist the facts. The truth is, profit share is classified as taxes paid by oil companies, with tax certificates issued accordingly. That's international standard practice. Yet some voices continue to mislead the public about this aspect of the agreement. Tonight, we set the record straight. We'll break through the noise and give you the facts so that you can see what's really at stake. Let's get into it by welcoming on screen none other than Joel Bagudin, who has been joining us, well, weekly to share commentary on these very important topics. Joel, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Cardell. Good evening to the viewers, and thank you for having me once again for another insightful and interesting discussions.
Yeah. So let's jump right into it, Joel. Now, the IMF's latest Article 4 report on Guyana highlights strong economic growth and sound fiscal management. What are the key takeaways from this report, and what does this mean for ordinary Guyanese citizens?
So, thank you for starting with that first question there on the IMF report. So, the IMF conducted an independent assessment of the economy, the state of the economy, and the government's policies, economic policies, that is, and how the government is managing the economy.
Mm,
And their findings, their findings are essentially very similar to my own findings that I come here week after week, as well as in my many articles that I write on policy analysis, budget analysis, and in engaging in public debate with
mm,
others in on some of these issues. The IMF has clearly independently concluded and derive a similar assessment of where things are in our economy. Now, having said that, I don't want to go into too much of boring technical details other than to say that it is consistent with my own independent view and assessment. I also want to state that in relation to the IMF assessment, that Guyana is not on an IMF program. And you heard the president and the vice president alluded to this fact that we were on an IMF program many years ago when we were declared a bankrupt state
right.
and under the presidency of the stewardship and presidency of our current vice president. We managed to exit that program in 2006. So since 2006, we have not been on an IMF program, but as a country of interest, they continue to uh, conduct this annual Article 4 assessment. And I say that we're a country of interest, particularly to the IMF, because what we were able to achieve when we sign on to the IMF program in the late 80s, there were many other countries that were experiencing similar challenges. And in fact, some of them were worse off than
Mm,
Guyana, and some of them were perhaps less to a lesser extent. And despite that, we've had during that period from the late 80s, um, from 1992 when the PPP were elected, and that entire transition process of the economy from
Mm.
1992 to 2006. We've had in between that period many other challenges. We had the 2005 flood, where we had a lot of setback, and the setback was substantial. The impact on the economy, the negative impact on the economy, based on an independent assessment done by ECLAC, which is a regional institution, concluded that the impact was equivalent to a loss of 60% of our GDP,
Wow.
as a result of that 2005 flood. And that's one example, which was a natural disaster. Then, of course, you had the political economy challenges: violence, crime, slow fire, more fire, the whole dark era, where you had criminal elements wreaking havoc, the massacres, the Bartica massacre, and so on. So, despite all of that, we were able to exit the IMF program because we were able to graduate out of a previously declared bankrupt country back to financial and economic viability and stability by 2006.
Mm.
So that in of itself was a remarkable achievement in record time, uh, by the IMF standard. And since then, we've remained a country of interest to the IMF, positive interest, that is. Now, coming back to the assessment, I also want to state, for the benefit of the viewers, to understand the level of my involvement too in these consultations, that when they come here, their methodology is that they would look at the data, they would look at the reports, they would also meet with key stakeholders to understand the drivers behind the numbers, behind the
Mm.
data, to get that qualitative assessment. In order to do the qualitative assessment and to understand what is the story behind the numbers. So they would meet with the government, the policymakers, they would meet with the opposition, and they would meet with the private sector.
Mm.
So I was part of that consultation that met with the IMF team that came down here for the private sector. I was part of the private sector team. And so I would have made some contributions, particularly on the question of poverty. And I was pleased to see that those qualitative contributions were reflected in the report,
Mm.
that I particularly was keen to note, um, to the IMF team, that on the issue of poverty, we haven't had a comprehensive study on poverty in Guyana since the last study was done since in the 80s. So even this World Bank assessment that mainly the critics often make reference to, the World Bank's assessment of Guyana's state of poverty is challengeable. I have challenged it because it does not take into account many factors. And so I had disputed that, and that was well, uh, what I did in terms of disputing that was well documented in the media. I wrote several pieces on it, not only to the media, but I went as far as to engage the World Bank office in Ghana and
Mm.
engage the technical officers, the country representative here in Ghana. And those reports are well, um, it is a matter of public record. And I said to the IMF that because we don't have uh, a comprehensive updated study, the only updated study that I know we've done would be vis-a-vis the census that was conducted a few years ago, which the final report is pending to be published.
Mhm.
And from my interaction, my engagement with the Bureau of Statistics, uh, on other work that I do and in requesting data and so on, the unofficial estimate based on that census that was conducted, the unofficial estimate is of poverty in Guyana is less than 30%. I say unofficial because the report is not yet published, it's not yet finalized, right? So I said to them the unofficial estimate coming out of this census is that poverty is under 30%. And can we, is there a way in which we can corroborate that?
Mm.
And of course, there is. And I said to them, if you look at a couple of indicators, key indicators, and I point to increase in net disposable income. If you take our income tax data, personal income tax data, which is public information, those statistics are available in the budget estimates. And you look at a base year, let's say 2014, to capture the pre-oil period, as well as the last year the PPP was in office in 2014. Then you capture the APNU period 2015, 2020, and then up to 2024, right? So if you look at that time series of data from 2014 as the base year to 2024, net disposable income using, and this is just one indicator, using the effective income tax rate has grown from 71 billion in 2014 to 400 and projected 20 projected 2025 growth 416 billion based on this year's adjustment to the income tax rate.
Mm.
So in a 10-year period or over this time series, using 2014 as the base year, you have net disposable income that has grown by almost six times. By almost six times. And if we are now to go into what are the drivers of that growth? Now there are several factors that led to that outcome. And they are not by accident or incidental or by default. It is as a result of direct policies, deliberate policies, direct intervention, and overall management of the economy on the part of the government of the day. Not this outcome cannot be derived by accident or by magic.
Mm.
So let's take the one indicator, for example, the growth in net disposable income. That growth in net disposable income, by the way, before I get into the factors, excludes that segment of the working population who are below, who are earning below the tax threshold and therefore would not be required to pay taxes.
Right.
So, and based on my estimation, that segment is about maybe 30, $40 billion a year in income. But let's forget about that segment for now and just focus on those who are earning above the threshold and therefore paying taxes. So we have that data to work the numbers backwards to derive at your net disposable income. So from 70 to $416 billion, almost six times, nearly six times increase in net disposable income over this time series of data, over this time period. The drivers of that result are, we know that In the 2015-2020 period, the former APNU FC government put thousands of people on the breadline. You had the 7,000 sugar workers, which which affected indirectly about 40,000 other households. Then you had the 2,000 Amerindians. So you have about maybe conservatively about 50,000 households that were directly negatively impacted by way of losing their income, losing their job, being denied earning opportunities. So we had to put back those 50,000 people to work. So that had to be addressed. So you had that was the situation that we came out from. Those people had to go back to work.
Right.
And with the massive expansion in all the sectors, in the non oil economy, particularly, not just the oil, what is happening in the oil and gas sector, but the multiplier effect in the non oil economy. And we have seen strong growth in the non oil economy.
Well, Joel,
We,
I wanna jump in there.
mm,
Since you touched on the oil economy and non-oil economy. Now, some
mm.
opposition voices claim that Guyana is overly reliant on oil revenues. How do you respond to those
I'll get
concerns?
to that. I'm glad.
The
Yes,
economic
I saw.
diversification and sustainability.
Yeah, yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. So, so the non-oil economy is recording strong growth, double digit. In fact, this year, last year, non-oil economy growth was 13%, and the overall growth in economy. Sorry, this year 2025, non-oil economy growth is projected at 13%, and overall growth is projected at 10%. So that those outlook and those results, the strong non-oil economy growth is not by accident. It is the factor, it is the expansion in the economy that is putting back people who were put out of a job to work. That's one factor. Two, it is creating new opportunities that is in turn creating job opportunities for other people who have not been working before and people who are coming out of school, out of high school, out of university, looking for opportunities, who require job opportunities. Those opportunities have been created on the back of the expansion of the economy. So new job creation.
Hmm.
Then we have because of the expansion and the dynamism of the economy, and as we grow more and more sophisticated and develop more industries, the third factor is that they're better paying jobs. They're better paying jobs. So people, an accountant, for example, 15 years ago, who was earning $200,000, that same accountant for that same level, for that same skill set, is now earning $800,000. That's how significantly uh, better pay packages we have. People are earning in the economy that we're building and growing of today for tomorrow. The
Hmm.
present, this is what is happening in the present, and it will only get better in the future as we continue to build and expand and diversify the economy. So, third factor, there are higher paying jobs out there, and there are many of them. The the fourth factor, as people, again, coming back to the direct policies of the government, making free training, certification, free education, scholarships, so that people who did not have an opportunity to get a degree now have an opportunity to get a degree. Those who already have a degree have the opportunity to upskill, upgrade themselves, continuously invest in their professional and personal development, which in turn enhances your earning opportunity, your earning capacity. So all these are the factors that would have led to this outcome in the increase in net disposable income, and which is not by accident, which is not by default. It is as a result of the deliberate, intentional policies, and coupled with the manner in which the economy is managed. So having said that, now and that's just one indicator. I could go on and talk. If I have to talk about five more indicators, we'll have to do that in maybe five different episodes
Mm.
to get into the detail and to peel it back, right? To break it down, as you say, this program, we're breaking it down for you. It will take me five, it'll take us 5 episodes to focus on five indicators. But let me just talk about briefly one other indicator, or two other indicator briefly. GDP is measured by an equation, is expressed, the measurement of GDP can be mathematically expressed by an equation, and that equation is GDP is equal to G plus C plus I plus NE. That equation represents, G represents, the G in that equation represents government spending, the C represents consumption expenditure, the I represents investment, and NE represents net exports. So if we understand that equation, GDP is really increase in expenditure, government spending, consumption or household expenditure, investments in the economy, private sector investment, foreign direct investment, and of course increase in our in the non-oil sector, the export, the non-oil export sectors increase in our exports, right?
Mm.
Net exports. That is what GDP is. And so on the issue of poverty, you can't have rising poverty in a country at the same time you're having rising consumption expenditure. That doesn't happen. If there is rising poverty in a country, you would see a decline in consumption spending, because it means if more people are going into poverty for whatever reason, it means they do not have spending power.
Mm.
But the evidence, the empirical evidence that is before us, when I look at the numbers, tells a different story than what Elson Law wants the country to believe. The empirical evidence, if we look at this second indicator, we talk about income. Now let's talk about household spending on consumption. Just consumption alone. Consumption spending has gone up from 8% of GDP in 2014 to 25% of GDP in 2024. Now, 8% of GDP in 2014, we were a $4 billion economy, a 4 billion US dollars. So that is 8% of 4 billion US. 25% of GDP in today's economy, the size of our economy today in 2024 and 2025, we're talking about 25% on a $30 billion economy, 30
Mm.
billion US, not four. There's a massive difference there. So we are talking about consumption expenditure in terms of the value of consumption expenditure. That is almost equivalent to the size of our entire national budget, 1.4 trillion. $1.4 trillion. So you can't, so that number tells you a totally different story. If there is a rise in income, and that rise in income is followed by a rise in consumption spending in the economy, it means poverty can't be moving in the same direction. Poverty is moving in the opposite direction. If income and consumption is rising, then poverty is moving in the opposite direction. Poverty is declining,
Mm.
which is consistent with our unofficial estimate, less than 30%. And where was our poverty in the 80s when the PNC ruled for nearly 30 years? Nearly 90%. So from 90% to less than 30%. Fair enough, we do not have an official poverty study or we do not have the census report in the public domain as yet. I'm saying this is the unofficial estimate, under 30%.
Mm.
Is there other metrics? Are there any other metrics or indicators that we could go to and extrapolate to corroborate this unofficial estimate? I've just done it for you. I've just given you hard empirical data. Income, consumption. A third one briefly. When you look at importation of cars on the road, motor vehicle, motor vehicle ownership. We ain't talk about housing yet. Housing is fourth. Housing is a fourth indicator. Car ownership has moved from 2014 from one in every five persons owning a car to two in every five persons owning a car in 2024 2025. From one in every five to two in every five. Now, a series is 10,000. There was a time when a series took maybe 5 years to complete,
Yeah.
to register 10,000 vehicles. Now we are completing five series in a single year. So when we were doing 10,000 vehicles in 5 years, we are now registering 50,000 vehicles in 1 year.
Yeah.
How could that be consistent with the story that there is rising poverty? That's three solid indicators: verifiable, factual, scientific, empirical indicators. Where is the rising poverty? Right?
Well, let's discuss it.
I did not talk about how I didn't go into housing as yet. I didn't
Yeah.
go into the affordability of housing through below market rates, um, to access loans. I didn't talk about the mortgage interest relief. I didn't talk about the subsidies for first time homeowners, foundation materials, and so on. We didn't get in. I didn't even touch that. So this was essentially my contribution to the IMF team that was here, and I was very pleased to see that level of qualitative and qualitative analysis with respect to poverty was acknowledged and and reflected in the report in their concluding statement, because they did ask me after I made this contribution in the same manner that I'm presenting here. One of the lead technical persons asked me if I have any documentations, because I spoke about the World Bank. I spoke about how I disputed the World Bank poverty rate, and he asked me if I have any documentations of any work I've done, you know, and of course the answer is yes, right? And I sent him a bunch of stuff, recent stuff that I did. So I was happy to see that reflected in the report.
Yeah.
So coming to your question now about this oil dependency. So I saw um, this point was made. I saw this yesterday or the day before yesterday, by Terence Campbell, made a post on his Facebook, which when I saw it, I said I will address it on this program here tonight. And in economics, there is something called time lag. There's something called time lag, meaning the intended results of your policies would take time before it is manifested into reality. It would not happen overnight. It would not happen in a year or 2 years. It will take time. Think of a tree. You plant a tree. You don't plant the seed today And then tomorrow morning, you're picking the fruit. The tree would take time to grow. Every day you would nurture that seed. The seed would germinate. It will start to grow. It will shoot up. You will water it, take care of the weed, and you're nurturing this tree, and taking care of it, ensuring that pests do not take it over. You ensure that it has enough sunlight and it gets enough water, and that there isn't enough the weeds don't take it over and so on. And you have to do that for a long period before the tree starts to bear, and then you reap the fruits. That is what is meant by time lag. Same thing in economics. So let's take, for example, the education, the objectives in the government's national policy for education. What is the main objective? The main objective is to have an educated population. We want our entire population to be educated. We want our entire population to have the skills, the technical competencies and capabilities to be able to create opportunities as well as to respond to the new job opportunities that will be in demand in the new economy that we are building and creating. So, right now, the labor market situation is such that we have, in the next 10 years, we need, and there were some studies done in this regard, in the medium term, we need at least 100,000 skilled labor in different fields, in a variety of different fields. We need engineers, we need agriculture specialists, we need doctors, we need teachers, we need professionals, accountants, lawyers, engineers. In the medium term, we need about 150,000 to 200,000 a skilled an additional skilled labor force with these variety of skill sets. Presently, we do not have it. Presently, we have a skills deficit. We have less than 1% of our labor force population that possess a tertiary level education, and with the 1% that do possess a tertiary level education, some of them have skills mismatch. They do not have, meaning they do not have the required. They're qualified, but they do not have the required um, competencies and skills that are in the market, that are in demand in the market. So those people who are qualified, they too have to go and study something else to align themselves with the opportunities that are in demand in the market,
Mm.
right? So skills deficit, skills mismatch, and we only have less than 1%.
Right.
So in order to build out, we have people, we don't have a shortage of people. We want our people. We have this 200,000 people. We can source it from our labor market.
Right.
So we want to equip, our policy is to equip those people, train them, provide the opportunities, and provide all the training and access to all the training at the expense of the state, no expense to the population, to meet these demand that are inevitable or that are imminent in the medium term. It will take 10 years to achieve that. A degree takes 3 years to complete. A master's takes another 2 years. And even those who are attending the technical institutes, it takes a couple of years to come out with a diploma, two
Right.
years or 3 years or whatever the case is. So it will take at least 10 years to to equip our people with the tools to meet those demands. That's one example. Let's talk about infrastructure, the same thing. The infrastructure that we're building today, the gas to energy project, the transformational investments, the bridge across the river, all the road networks, etc., that we're investing in today, the results of those infrastructure, the real impact of those infrastructure as enabling tools for prosperity, it will not happen until in another 10 years. Because by the time you finish, it takes a couple of years to build the road. All the road that we're building, that's a 5-year project. Some of it might be completed by the end of this year, some of it will still be ongoing. That's 5 years since 2020. And we still have projects, some completed. It takes time to
Right.
build these infrastructure. Then, what are the economic benefits of the road? Farm to market road, so that you could bring your produce out from the farm to access the market. It would More road network also reduces your logistic costs, your transportation costs, because you see the traffic congestion we have. If we don't build the road, how you get in, how you're managing the congestion, how you reducing time and saving money in your transportation cost for both for commuters as well as commercial and industrial purposes. Then these new access roads that we're building and new network opening up new land for commercial, residential, and industrial development. So you can't open up new land for industrial development and commercial development. You will not be able to attract the investment for new commercial and industrial development until we finish building the road and until we're now able to open up the land to facilitate that.
Right.
That takes another a few years to do. That takes time, right? So that is what is meant by a lag. So when we speak of, oh, the oil money, we're heavily dependent on oil, what is important is that we are implementing the right policies now that would yield the results that we want in the future. We are making the right investments with the oil money now that will yield the diversification results that we want for the future, the prosperity that we want to create for our people for the future. We have to do that now. So, when you consider all of that, all of those realities, then to say that we're heavily dependent on oil, one would have to qualify. If we were not doing these things, if we were not making these investments, and if we had the APNU AFC economic style of management, raising taxes, putting people out of jobs, closing down industries, and spending more on dietary and food and consumption and exorbitant um, benefits packages for themselves, then we can say that we are dependent on oil and we are in trouble because we're not building out the economy for the future. Then we have to worry. Then we have to worry. You
All
understand? So
right.
we are not dependent right now. Yes, oil is a major contributor to our GDP, but still only 30% of the oil resources is financing the budget. Non-oil revenue is still greater,
Mm.
and we are allocating, most importantly, these resources towards diversifying the economy away from oil and gas for the future. And we're doing all of the right things now. And that is what is important.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to turn your attention to something you mentioned earlier. Elson Lowe. Now, he has argued that the PPPC budgets from 2023 to 2025 do not adequately address poverty. I want to hear a response to that, given that there has been significant investment in housing, healthcare, education, and direct transfers. Um, I want you to talk about how that directly impacts poverty reduction. And talk to us a little more about specific indicators that would demonstrate the effectiveness of the government's poverty alleviation strategies.
So I think I adequately addressed that already. But what I want to say, what I want to point out is that the letter that you're referring to that Elson Lowe wrote, To which I responded, his conclusion about these budgets, 2020 to 2025, the PPPC's budgets, was that, remember, this guy is the economic advisor, and now we hear he's poised to be some presidential candidate for something.
Yeah.
So this is the ambition of this guy, which is, for a young man, I have no, I have no issues with that. It's good to be young and ambitious. That's, we should encourage it. We should encourage it. But when you have that type of ambition, then you got to back it up, buddy. The ambition is not a problem. The ambition, listen, I encourage anybody to have ambition. Anybody. And we all should. But that's not a problem. The ambition is good. But you got to be able to back it up with substance, with technical soundness. And so that is what I want to draw attention to. So in his letter, the genesis of his argument, or his core argument, is that all of the budgets, all of the PPPC's budget for this 5-year period, none of it mentioned a single word about poverty. And so that's the basis of his conclusion that the budget didn't address poverty, because the word poverty is omitted. Now, I don't know if I should laugh. I don't know if I should cry.
That's why I said out here wondering too. Like
I don't know. I don't know how I'm supposed to react to that, because he's correct in the sense the word poverty is nowhere in the budget speeches. Because I went and I look at all of it, and I did a search, and poverty is nowhere to be found. But I still don't know whether I should laugh or cry, because it does not support his argument. Not because the word is omitted in his speech, it means the budget does not address poverty. How do you address poverty? If you look at the budget themes, all the themes of the budget for all 5 years, there is one common word, and that common word is prosperity. Prosperity is the antonym for poverty. So how do you address poverty? Is not to lift people, is not to lift people out of poverty or to confront poverty, is to create prosperity and to build prosperity and to generate prosperity. And prosperity is the theme of all the budgets. So what are you talking about? So I don't know if
we're talking about Elson Lowe. That's what we're talking about.
If imagine if this is a presidential candidate and this is his main argument,
Yeah.
poverty is not in there, but ignores the theme that speaks to prosperity, then God help us. God help us.
Trouble. Well, let's move on. So, the Oil and Gas Governance Network claims that Guyana's Access to Information Act is inadequate. What are they getting wrong? Talk to us, Joel.
Laziness is a bad thing. And apart from laziness, if you have an agenda, then you must be transparent with your agenda. Don't have an agenda and you're using all sorts of concocted pretextual disguise to fool an entire country about your true agenda. Is either you are stupid or you think all of us are stupid, or the rest of us are stupid. Now, you saw there was a back and forth with me. First, they call out the Minister of Governance. The Minister of Governance offered a well put together solid, factual response to the concerns raised, then they were not happy with that. They come back and they respond to the minister. Oh, the minister didn't deal with this. And then Christopher Ram came, Lal Bachchan, Christopher Ram, he rambling all over the place. And so then I entered into the debate and addressed the matter, which I think it's an issue that they're deliberately overcomplicating, that does not require to be complicated. And I sought to the best of my ability to simplify the issue in terms of explaining it for people to understand, recognizing that they would not appreciate it, which I did state, and they did demonstrate, prove me right that they did not appreciate it with the nonsensical responses that came there that followed.
Right.
Um, so what is the issue? So they're claiming that they invoke the Access to Information Act to get the tax certificates that the GRA issued to Exxon, the oil companies, that represented their share of taxes. Now, are you interested in this certificate or are you interested in the taxes that the certificate represents? I
Right.
think what you're really interested is in the taxes that the certificate represents, because our tax laws in this country does not permit any third party, does not permit the GRA, which is the tax authority for the country, to issue to any third party tax information for another person.
Mm.
So they can't go and ask GRA for my tax certificates. They can't go and ask GRA for your tax certificate and expect, or tax returns, and expect the GRA has some sort of responsibility or obligation to honoring their request.
Right.
In a likewise manner, they can't do so for any company. No company, no individual, they have no right to that information. However, what they really want is the tax. How much taxes, according to the 2016 Petroleum Agreement, how much taxes are these um, uh, the oil companies, Exxon and Hess, the U.S. companies in mainly, are they claiming? Right, that would be reflected on that tax certificate. And I said to them, listen, you don't have to go to the tax, the information, access to information act or the commission, because the act states, if you read the access to information act, there are several provisions in there that clearly identifies the conditions under which you would not be able to get any information from the access to through the Access to Information Act.
Mm-hmm.
There are several provisions in there. You, not because we have the Access to Information Act and it's a universal act, that does not mean you automatically are entitled to every single document and cabinet documents and everything else. No, the act recognizes that there will be certain sensitive information that pertains to cabinet decisions, cabinet discussions, for example,
Mm-hmm.
matters on national security, etc. Those sort of sensitive documentations shall not be made public. And that is understandable.
Right.
Now, I deviated a little bit from the specific issue. This coming now to the specific issue, the act states that if a document that you are requesting it can be accessed through another agency and that is publicly available and you can access it for a fee, then that document, you cannot come to the Information Commission or the Commissioner of Information under the Access to Information Act to request that document. That is what the
Okay.
act says. In other words, if you can go somewhere else and get this information and the information is already in the public, you just got to go and pay a small fee and get a copy from the Deeds and Commercial Registry, for example, in this instance, or
Mm.
it is already on the website of a ministry or some other website on the internet. then you can't go to the commissioner of information and ask him to give you that document. The act
Right.
provides for that because imagine if the act did not do that, you would have lazy people burdening this information commission with all sorts of frivolous requests, all
Right.
because they're lazy. The act is not there, and the information commission is not there to do your work for you because you're lazy. So I said to them, and the minister pointed this out, and then I elaborated on it in my responses that what you're interested in is the income taxes that the oil companies report on their financial statements. That would be on those the basis upon which the tax certificates would be issued. And
Mhm.
therefore, the income tax information, the income tax uh, amount or liability or income tax payments is reported on the financial statements. And the financial statements are required by law for every company to be lodged with the deeds and commercial registries. And any document, whether it's a private company or a public company, any document lodged at the deeds and commercial registries, it becomes a public document. With that means anybody can go to the registry and pay a fee, $5,000 or 3,000. I don't know how much, a very small fee, and to get a copy of that financial statement. So that means if you want to know how much taxes Christopher Ram pay, Raman McRae, or if you want to know how much taxes Kaichor News pay, you could go at the deeds and commercial registry and request a copy of their financial statement and get it. And you would
Mm.
see. So I point them to that direction. And they know this. Christopher Ram knows this. Christopher Ram now has the audacity to come and say, I don't know what I'm talking about. That we clearly it's two different financial statements because the one that he got and I got, the one that he got apparently and got the tax information, and he's being dishonest.
Mm.
He's just simply being dishonest. For what reason I don't know. So that is the situation. And today I had cause to pen another response to Christopher Ram because he made this he put it in a way that one would believe that this financial statement doesn't have the tax information. So I said, okay, if you think we got two different financial statements,
Mm.
I am sending my letter of response to you, to the editors of the newspaper, the media houses, along with the copies of the financial statements that are in my possession, which are the same statements he has in his possession. So the media houses could see for themselves the income tax data. I quantify that number, I consolidated, and I added cumulatively. And this is the figure you're looking for
But why you think a long-standing lawyer and accountant would want to mislead people like this?
because he has an agenda. And his agenda is that he and only he knows everything, and only he is right and everybody else is wrong.
Joel, I want to bring you back to a topic that you have touched on quite a few times already. Now, there has been an ongoing debate about Guyana's oil profit sharing agreement, with some critics claiming that the government is not getting a fair deal. Um, I'm going to ask you again to respond to this and explain in detail how this works and what's currently taking place.
So, at this, again, coming, I think I dealt with this extensively on this very program
Yeah,
some time
yeah.
ago. So, I'll try to, I'm mindful of the time. So, I'll try to be brief. So, the oil and gas industry globally is a dynamic industry. And when we're looking at our the 2016 petroleum agreement, our fiscal the fiscal terms in there that we're getting, we have to look at it in the context of the dynamism of the global industry, and we have to account for the time factor.
Mm,
Otherwise, this notion about fair deal, whether it's fair or not, would be a subjective argument. So I don't want to give you a subjective response. I want to qualify and give you as objective as I can possibly get on the issue. In 2016, if we go back to 2016, at that point in time, we can make the argument, which I am on record making the argument when the contract was released, that it was compared to what was available when you look at other global regimes, it was a contract that was way more favorable, way more favorable to the oil companies than Guyana. In other words, it could have been better. It could have been better. And at that point in time, the notion that it was not a fair deal to Guyana at that point in time had greater merit than it does in 2025, from 2016 to 2025. And I say this because it is a global industry. The moment the former government signed on to that deal, it instantaneously impacted the rest of the global industry. And so, what happened since then to now is that it made us a fiscally more attractive destination for oil and gas investment. And other countries with stronger fiscal terms, with greater fiscal terms, were now at a globally competitive disadvantage in relative to Guyana.
Mm.
And since then to now, many other countries, the United Kingdom, many other African countries, Trinidad and Tobago, and right now Suriname. I told you the story already with Suriname. Suriname does not have a final investment decision as yet because they will not make this public because it's an election year for them. But this is industry knowledge that I am privy to, that there is no agreement as yet because the oil companies are asking or demanding, rather, I'm told that they're demanding, not asking, more favorable terms. And
Mm.
that is because of what we did in 2016. We now made other countries less competitive, and therefore, and this is how markets work.
Mm.
If you and I are in the same business, and if you selling you selling watermelon juice, and you alone selling on the block, nobody else competing with you, and you selling for $2,000 for one, and you've been selling for $2,000 for the past 5 years, and you in that 5 years you must increase it by now to $3,000. No competition, no competition whatsoever. You have a monopoly, so you're enjoying that high price, and people, they want the watermelon juice, and so they're buying it. But tomorrow, I come on the same block with you, right next to you, and I sell it for half the price. I sell
Mm.
it for $1,500. What do you think happened to you? Is either you keep your price elevated at $3,000, or you come down to 1,500, and that becomes the market rate, or you come below 1,500 and you
Low.
go to
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
That's how markets work. So this thing about fair deal in 2025 and the fair deal in 2016, we're talking about two different time. There is a timing factor, and the the market factors in 2016 inevitably evolved since then as a direct result of our 2016 agreement, right? So I'll so I think that's enough to respond to the question. The other part I would venture to say, is that the government did honor their side of the agreement. That, listen, we are going to renegotiate all the other contracts, recognizing that the Stabroek block had already moved into production, and there's the stability clause in there. We don't want to disrupt the momentum, right? And I've dealt with that extensively in many previous occasions. But they have nonetheless already developed a new fiscal framework which is way better but still globally competitive. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Joe, we out of time for today. Thank you for taking the time to dive into these topics with us. Join us next week for another episode of Behind the Agenda with myself and Joel. And thank you guys for tuning in this evening. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place for Behind the Agenda, plans, policies, and progress.
The numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands.